Guys, I've been giving you my take on this Supreme Court hearing on abortion, but now I want to bring on a real expert, a real authority on the subject, my daughter, Danielle D'Souza Gill, author of, I think, the most important book on abortion published in recent years. It's called The Choice, The Abortion Divide in America. By the way, she's also the host of Counterculture with Danielle D'Souza Gill. This is on Epoch TV. Danielle, great to have you on the show. My gosh, you spent a good bit of yesterday watching and listening to this hearing from start to finish. Let me just start by getting your immediate sort of take or impression of what you saw and heard.
I thought that it was a really interesting hearing. I think it was really interesting hearing the questions asked of both sides, asked of Stewart and the pro-choice woman as well. So I think that we really got kind of just a see into what the justices were thinking in their questions.
Now, if I'm looking at the articles about the hearing and the aftermath, the consensus, there's a kind of a consistent message. Supreme Court appears open to upholding Mississippi abortion restriction. But at the same time, the articles go, we're not sure what the Supreme Court is going to decide about Roe versus Wade itself. What do you think, just given what you heard, if you had to sort of make a bet, do you think the Supreme Court is going to uphold Mississippi, but at the same time sustain Roe? Or do you think that Mississippi is going to go up and Roe is going to go down?
Well, what I think I heard from some of the justices and what they were saying is there was kind of one school of thought, which is what Kavanaugh talked about, which was overturning Roe, sending it back to the states. He talked about how we should not make this a decision that is up to the Supreme Court, but make it up to people, since this is such a fraught issue and a divided issue. And he had others, I think Roberts, who indicated that 15 weeks is not that different from viability. So perhaps his line of thinking is something like, well, maybe 15 weeks would be kind of the new marker compared to viability, since they're so similar in his mind. So I think there might be some who want to have a new point at which abortion is limited, whereas someone like Kavanaugh might want to send it back to the states. So I think, Kagan and Sotomayor and perhaps Breyer, of course, will be on the pro-choice side of this decision, but I'm not sure that all of the conservative justices will be in agreement.
I mean, let's start with the, quote, compromise position, which is the Roberts position. That alone would be a huge win, because essentially it would mean, even if you don't formally overturn Roe, that Roe is effectively dead. Why? Because after all, Roe set a viability, which is 22, 23 weeks. And by and large, Roe in practice has meant no meaningful restrictions on abortion in the full 9 months. So that at the very least, if the Roberts position prevails, that compromise position, so to speak, would still mean that Roe, as it has been interpreted for 50 years, is gone, and that states would now be free to impose abortion restrictions 15 weeks and going forward, right?
Well, I think that another justice would have to join them, because if we count Kagan, Sotomayor, Breyer, and then Roberts, let's say he is on the side of not overturning Roe, then we still need one more. And I don't think Alito or Kavanaugh seemed like that in any way. I think Alito referred to the Plessy versus Ferguson case, which was overturned in the past without new information, as he talked about. And so sometimes there's a decision that has to be thrown in the ash heap of history, and we have to overturn it because it was initially wrong. And he kind of compared this to that. And so I think then if we look at the newer conservative justices like Amy Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch, they all seem to be very much on the side that was against Roe v. Wade, at least it seemed from their questions. So I'm hopeful that Roe v. Wade will be overturned.
Let's look at what some of these people actually said. It seems like Amy Coney Barrett focused on the issue that, since Roe, we've constantly heard about the hardships of women, the difficulty of, quote, forcing them to go through with a pregnancy that they don't want to, changing their life, against their will. And Amy Coney Barrett goes, well, wait a minute. You've got all these so-called safe haven laws, which allow, in a sense, parents to abrogate their parental responsibility. You have obviously not only adoption, adoption, but long lines of people waiting to adopt. Of course, we know Amy Coney Barrett has herself adopted into her own family. And so she goes, well, what is the real difficulty here, except for saying the inconvenience of having to give birth? All of that seemed to me, it unnerved the left to hear this coming from Amy Coney Barrett. But I think Amy Coney Barrett was sort of playing her hand, don't you?
I do. I think each of the justices brought up different really good points that were all really relevant to the conversation. And so she focused, I think, on that, those safe haven laws. And we saw some of the other justices focus on other things that are very important. Even Clarence Thomas mentioned how there could be, in another case, a woman who is perhaps abusing drugs, things like that. And so the child in the womb is sort of at her, dispense as far as being harmed by this. And so what is the state's interest in protecting that child? So right now, under Roe v. Wade, the state doesn't have an interest really before viability in protecting the child. And so I think what he was getting at is that clearly the state does have an interest in protecting the child in the womb.
When we come back, I want to probe this some more with Danielle D'Souza Gill. We're going to talk now about what the liberals had to say in this hearing. We'll be right back.